It sounds impossible, but it's true. Scientists just brought up a 112-year-old camera from the bottom of the ocean where the Titanic sank. Even though it was covered in rust, they managed to save the film inside. What they discovered amazed everyone. This wasn't just some old item. It was like a silent witness that recorded the Titanic's last moments. But here's the strange part. The camera wasn't where it should have been. They found it almost half a mile away from the ship, buried in mud like someone had hidden it there on purpose. After months of careful work, the few pictures that survived are almost ready to be seen. The experts are worried. Some are frightened because whatever this camera captured wasn't meant to be found. The deep-sea submarine reached down into the dark water with its robot arm, carefully pushing through thick mud covering the wreckage. The sub's lights showed pieces of history lost in the sea over 100 years ago. Twisted metal and scattered belongings covered the ocean floor. But then the crew saw something incredible. A camera that looked surprisingly good despite being half buried. Even after years of rust and crushing water pressure, its leather case was almost perfect. It was a Kodak Brownie from 1912, a quiet reminder of times before the ship's name became linked with tragedy. Expert diver David Thompson watched the video from above and felt nervous. "Something's wrong here," he said quietly. He knew when things didn't belong, and this camera definitely shouldn't be so far from any known wreckage. The camera came out of the mud easily, as if it had been waiting there. The research ship's crew watched silently. The camera looked odd, almost too perfect, barely damaged by time. Back on the surface, the crew handled the camera carefully. "The metal parts are tarnished, but look at this leather strap," one worker said, bending it gently. "It's still flexible. That shouldn't be possible." Pressure and salt water should have turned it into a rusty mess, yet it had survived over a century underwater in good condition. The crew members looked at each other nervously. "Maybe it's not from the Titanic," one suggested. "Could be some collector dropped it last week." "Only one way to find out," another whispered. "We need to check the film." The crew grew quiet. What would the film show if it wasn't damaged? The Titanic's final moments, the chaos of sinking, or just ordinary memories from a modern tourist? In soft light, the lead expert traced the camera's edges with her fingers. It had no marks to show who owned it. Cameras like this were rare, expensive, and heavy in 1912. Someone with purpose, maybe a writer or wealthy traveler, would have owned it. The team argued about what to do next. Some wanted to be careful. Others pushed for quick action. The film was delicate. Any mistake could destroy whatever pictures remained. But the real hesitation wasn't technical. The unspoken question was whether they really wanted to see what was on that film. The captain called for a vote. 6 people said yes, 6 said no. The captain decided to sleep on it. The next morning, he made his choice. They would develop the film. And the crew didn't notice the final frame's date. April 15th, 1912, 2:17 a.m., the exact moment the Titanic disappeared beneath the waves. The camera sat on an examination table in the research ship's lab. The crew had locked it in a climate-controlled box. The film inside was the real mystery. According to science, old film should have dissolved completely after sitting in salt water for over a century. Yet there it was, seemingly untouched by time. The first worker to try opening the camera wore shaking gloves. The latch resisted, then gave way with a reluctant click. The film was tightly wound, but when the worker tried to unroll it, the spool suddenly locked as if something was gripping it from inside. On the second attempt, there was a cracking sound, and rust-colored flakes scattered across the table. Unlike normal rust, These particles formed strange patterns, looking like letters or symbols. "What the hell is that?" the worker whispered. Dr. Margaret Stone, the chief expert, stepped forward with her face pale. She had worked with countless items from sea disasters, but nothing like this. The rust was more than just decay. It was something that had gotten into the film itself. "Everyone out except essential personnel," Dr. Stone ordered. The flakes had formed clusters that almost looked readable, maybe a name or word that stayed unclear. The team tried using a special scanner, but the machine couldn't read it properly. The screen flickered with interference until a distorted preview appeared, a blur of shadows that might have been human shapes. As night wore on, the tired team worked in shifts. Every attempt produced stranger results. They extracted data with impossible timestamps, and moments when the camera seemed to take pictures continuously for minutes. "This is getting out of hand," Dr. Stone muttered to her assistant. "Nothing about this makes sense." By dawn, the film's first clear frame appeared, a warped close-up of a ship's railing. But what made the room go silent was the timestamp. April 15th, 1912, 2:20 a.m., 3 minutes after the Titanic's final dive. This wasn't a modern tourist's old camera. This camera had been aboard the Titanic and somehow survived a full century underwater. Miraculously, the film had survived too. "This is no miracle," Dr. Stone whispered, shaking her head. As the others watched silently, she wrote one word in large red letters on the container: "Cursed." According to the ship's passenger list, Thomas Bradford was the only possible owner, a 28-year-old London journalist traveling in second class. But after April 15th, 1912, he vanished from all records. No lifeboat assignment. No survivor testimonies. The moment the Titanic sank, he simply disappeared. Bradford's notebook, found in 1987 from the wreckage, contained ordinary observations until the very last pages. The handwriting became jagged and smeared. The final entry read, "The ship has struck an iceberg. I must document this. I am taking photographs. God help me." That was it, no more explanation. The journal's final pages had been torn out. Analysis found faint impressions on the remaining paper, ghostly pressure marks from words written with such force they left traces. "Look at this," the expert told her colleague. "Someone was pressing so hard the pen nearly went through the paper. What could have made him write like that?" Bradford's cabin gave him a perfect view of the approaching iceberg, but no survivor remembered seeing a journalist with a camera that night. Thomas Bradford seemed to step out of history the instant he pressed that first terrible shutter. The camera's serial number matched Kodak's 1912 records, sold to a T. Bradford on Fleet Street. But researchers found no record of any journalist by that name working in 1912. Only a single old press pass. Its photo faded to gray fog where Bradford's face should have been. The lab workers noticed something in the camera's viewfinder. At certain angles, the glass seemed to hold an afterimage, a human figure standing just outside the frame. "Do you see that?" one worker asked his partner. "There's someone in there." The first recovered photo showed the ship's clock reading 11:40 p.m., the exact moment of impact, and reflected in the lens was a blurry figure. Thomas Bradford had gotten his story. He just never lived to tell it. The restoration lab's servers crashed 3 times before completing the first scan. The film defied every standard preservation technique. Chemical baths left strange residues, and sensors detected anomalies that shouldn't exist. Kim, the senior archivist, documented each failure. "This doesn't make any sense," she told her team. "The film reacts strangely to normal development solutions. Under the microscope, the silver crystals formed geometric patterns rather than random decay." The digital team faced problems. Images would appear upside down. Data tags showed incorrect dates, including timestamps from future years. Most troubling were the file sizes. Each scan took up exactly 47.47 megabytes, regardless of content. "These numbers keep repeating," the lead worker muttered. 47.47, then 191.22 every single time. That's not normal. Dr. Stone discovered the most disturbing abnormality. The digital scans contained an extra layer invisible to human eyes, a pulse occurring every 2 minutes and 20 seconds. When amplified, these pulses created a frequency that marine geologists recognized as the resonance frequency of the Titanic sinking site. "It's like the wreck site itself is embedded in these images," Dr. Stone explained. "How is that even possible?" On the 7th day, they had stabilized 12 scans. They refused to show them to anyone, not because of what the photographs revealed, but because of what they left out: empty spaces that should have been there. The camera's mechanism presented its own mystery. X-rays showed the frame counter indicated exactly 47 exposures, a number matching no known film type from 1912. The shutter speed was frozen at 1/47th of a second. Kodak had never made shutters with that setting. "Everything about this camera is wrong," Kim said. "It shouldn't exist, but here it is." The world held its breath as the first photographs appeared on press conference screens. Months of restoration had revealed what no living person had witnessed: the Titanic's final moments through a doomed passenger's eyes. The earliest images looked ordinary. Children played on deck, their faces bright with laughter. A woman held a basket of Irish lace, her body leaning as the deck began its first tilt. The lace spilled over the edge, making an ordinary moment extraordinary because both would vanish beneath the Atlantic within minutes. Then came the clock, hands frozen at 2:17. The image's clarity was unnatural. Every scratch was visible, as if the camera had focused through chaos to capture time's final breath. The grand staircase photographs sucked oxygen from the room. Crystal chandeliers hung at impossible angles. One shot showed water already lapping at the bottom stairs. The reflection in the wood paneling revealed people clinging to railings above, something the camera hadn't directly captured. "My God," whispered a reporter. "You can see their faces." The lifeboat images were terrifying. Boat number 14 hung at a drunken angle, ropes partially severed. Faces looked upward, not in terror but in dawning realization. One woman's mouth formed a perfect O, gloved hands pressed to her cheeks. Then the camera plunged into nightmare. Early frames showed corridors made bizarre by their steep angle. The view burst onto deck where chaos dissolved into individual tragedies. A man trying to break open a locked life vest cabinet. Mothers struggling to hold children above rising water. "Look at that," someone gasped. "He's still taking pictures even as everything falls apart." The camera swung to face the water. A dark wall of ocean rushed across the deck, consuming everything. A hand reached down before the lens hit water. Next came bubbles and darkness. Then, impossibly, one more image. The ocean surface viewed from below, where the massive ship should have been. Only empty water stared back. The press conference ended in silence. The final timestamp burned in everyone's mind. April 15th, 1912, 2:20:47. 3 minutes after the stern disappeared. No one should have survived long enough to record those 3 minutes. "How did he take that last picture?" a journalist finally asked. "He should have been dead." Every photograph captured a crucial detail about the disaster. The timing matched exactly how long air trapped in the stern kept the wreck afloat after submersion. But in that stunned moment, only one thing mattered. They had witnessed a man's death, the actual footage of someone's final moments. And somehow, 112 years later, that death was still happening. The film's revelation sent shockwaves worldwide. Historians were stunned as the photographs contradicted long-held beliefs about the sinking. Marine engineers studied the footage frame by frame, making their computer models obsolete. "Everything we thought we knew was wrong," admitted one maritime expert. "These images show the real story." Skeptics struggled to accept the discovery's authenticity. How could a fragile 1912 camera survive over a century underwater? No one had good answers. "We're still trying to understand it ourselves," Dr. Stone told reporters. "By all laws of physics, this shouldn't exist." They felt like they were living a nightmare. Had they really discovered such an artifact by chance? How would they continue their lives after staring death in the face? Survivors' descendants wept during news conferences. Relatives came forward to identify passengers. They weren't just names anymore. They were mothers, fathers, children, gone forever but never forgotten. The photographs humanized the tragedy in ways no wreckage could. The first-person perspective sparked global debates about ethical archaeology. "We're not studying history anymore," wrote one journalist. "We're invading someone's dying moments." Museums rushed to update displays. The famous Titanic clock exhibit now featured Bradford's 2:17 photograph beside it. Two timepieces synchronized across eras. Psychologists identified a new condition called Titanic syndrome, the inability to view historical tragedies as abstract events. The footage's final moments became cultural shorthand for sudden absence. The phrase 2:17 moment entered common language, representing when normalcy disappears forever. "It's changed how we think about the past," explained one psychologist. "These weren't statistics anymore. They were real people, and we watched them die." As the camera was sealed away, the debate raged on. Had they preserved history or crossed a final line? The answer, like the Titanic itself, would remain in the depths forever. Did you enjoy this story? Is it right to watch someone die, even if it happened long ago? Let us know in the comments below. If you liked the story, subscribe to this channel and leave a like. Some things are meant to stay hidden. Thanks so much for listening. See you in the next video. Have a great day.